So they tell you that these lines are parallel, both in words and in these symbols here. And whenever you have parallel lines, you'll often hear this phrase, parallel lines cut by a transversal. Now they didn't use that wording here. However, it's still applicable because we have this transversal right there. So when you have two lines cut by a transversal, there's four angle relationships that you want to have mastered. And they're all displayed on side 4 of our math reference document, which is the back of page 34. So we already have discussed the difference between vertical angles and linear pairs, which is when you have two lines intersecting. However, when you have parallel lines cut by a transversal, in other words, you have the intersection of three lines, you have these four relationships. Now, corresponding angles means that they're in the same respective or corresponding position. For example, angles 1 and 5 are both in the upper left of their respective clusters, and corresponding angles are always congruent. And notice I listed what those corresponding angles are in this diagram. Now, notice angles 3, 4, 5, and 6 are between the blue lines, which means they're interior. 1, 2, 7, and 8 are outside of those blue lines, so they're exterior. Then you have alternate interior and alternate exterior. So that's when they alternate over the transversal, like 4 and 5, 3 and 6. So those are alternate interior, and the conclusion is they're congruent. The same is true for alternate exterior. So way out here, 1 and 8 are congruent, and so are 7 and 2. And the final relationship that's kind of the odd man out here, it's the only time that the conclusion is supplementary instead of congruent. And notice it's 3 and 5. Some books call them same side interior, and that makes sense as well. And then you have 4 and 6. So notice we have this angle out here, which is definitely exterior, and then we have this angle out here, which is also exterior, because they're both outside of these lines. Now, that being said, the ones that would actually be alternate exterior are the ones that are on the outside but pinched between the transversal and one of the parallel lines. So what I mean by that is, for example, this angle here, this X angle, is definitely one of the angles I would be looking at when talking about alternate exterior. The other one would actually be this one here, because you see how it's pinched between one of the two parallel lines and the transversal. So I can actually call this X because we know alternate exterior are congruent. And then we want to go back to our reference document and notice that you have two lines intersecting, which means it's either vertical angles or linear pairs. And in this case, you have linear pairs for these two angles. So we know that they're supplementary. And if we do 180 minus 149, we get our answer as 31.